So Kristen will introduce the podcast and me, and then Priya will bring you in. So don't say anything before
then. Welcome to First Impressions, the podcast. We talk about our love for Jane Austen and all Jane Austen related media and give a big middle finger to all the haters. I am Kristen, and I'm joined as always by Maggie.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
And we're thrilled to welcome again to the podcast our dear friend Priya, Bridgerton expert extraordinaire. Priya, welcome.
Yay. Hi. Welcome back, Priya.
Hello. I'm really excited to be back. And man, I'm nowhere near an expert, but I will happily chat about this with anybody all the time.
I think it was perhaps it was the actual day season 2 dropped. Priya texted me, don't talk about Bridgerton with Kristen until I could come on the podcast. Please, please, please. If not the day of, it was very soon thereafter. And of course, we are delighted to have her back with us.
It's so much fun last time.
I think we're going to kick it off just by talking about our general impressions of season 2, which focuses on Anthony and his very Kiss Me Kate inspired relationship with Kate Sharma.
Can we just, point of clarification, is it Anthony or Anthony? Because I feel like they weren't consistent.
I believe it is spelled Anthony, but they pronounce it Anthony because they're British. Is that correct? I have not read the book, so maybe Priya remembers from the book. Do they have the H in there?
Yeah, the H is definitely in there. Okay, and yeah. I feel like in the show, for the most part, they said Anthony.
I can't think of anyone who says Anthony with this. Anthony.
Anywho.
Okay, so what did you guys think of season 2? Can't wait to hear.
Priya, please.
Yeah, so I really liked it for a wide range of reasons. One of which is this is one of my favorite books in the series, and it's because I really love Kate as a character. There's something about her that her like energy that I just really always loved. And then, of course, they added in and made her brown in this season. And that was 100% something I was there for, because it's not often you get a South Asian romantic lead in a show. And so I really, really liked it. I know that there are pieces of it, and we can talk about this later, that I was like, I don't know if you needed this. But on the whole, I really, really enjoyed it. And especially I watched it for the second time around. And I was like last weekend, and I definitely was reminded about, it was just in the slow burn tension, which was different from the first season. I really, really enjoyed. So.
Oh man, I have to say that A plot with Anthony and Kate was firecrackers for the first whole half of the season. It was so watchable. It was so good. Both the actor and actress. I think he's Jonathan Bailey and I just lost my IMDb.
Simone Ashley.
Yeah, Simone Ashley. She, from the first second she was on the screen, incredibly charismatic and gorgeous. I remember the very first scene where she has that teal riding habit and she just pulls it off. And she's that huge braid. And I just sucked a breath in because she was so stunning. Not that
we'll
she
have
wasn't
to talk
also
about
a
costuming
good
as well.
She was a good actress. And and their give and take, their back and forth, it was so sparky. I thought that the plot, this is true of both the book and the movie for me, it was very comprehensible why Anthony didn't want to fall in love, first of all, and fall in love with her secondly. Because in any other scenario, you'd be so frustrated. You'd just be like, this is unnecessary. Just marry the one that you want. You know what I mean? And for there to be such a cogent reason why he wouldn't do that gave the story like that believability.
Sorry, Kristen, if I can ask one question, which episode was it where we see the flashbacks with his father's death and then his mother? Was that the second episode?
It's the second or the third one. It's early on.
Because I agree with you. Once they established that, and especially once we saw how broken his mother was when he died, I thought it made a lot more sense.
In the horrible situations he was put in. But I wanted to just round out my first impressions by saying every other B and C plot irritated the hell out of me.
Yeah.
And then the second part of the show, right, or after the big wedding, which obviously is a disaster catastrophe. I can't handle wedding weddings that don't go right. It's my one thing where I just like, I'm in agony if I have to watch a wedding that doesn't go right.
Your one thing, Kristen. Your one
not
thing.
my one thing, but one of my bigger things. And then it got so, it was such a downer, right? That those episodes were a struggle. Not that they weren't good, but for me, the pleasure of the series was mainly in the first half.
Okay. I really enjoyed season 2. I did a complete rewatch of season 1 and season 2 because I wasn't sure which one I preferred, but I think at the end of the day, I did prefer season 2. And for me, it's interesting that you said that about the other plots, because I found the subplots in season 2 much more compelling, except for Benedict, who is the worst and boring. But like, yes, the A plot, really great, totally invested, but everything with all the other siblings, and especially with Penelope, since now we know she's Lady Whistledown, and like how she's doing that balancing act. I found everything else, the stuff with the Featheringtons, who I like did not care about in the first season. I just found all of that a lot more compelling. I guess my problem with the structure, it was in season 1, like they got married halfway through, and then it was kind of like the falling in love with the person, finding the real person you married, right? Like learning who they are. My only problem is I thought that the slow burn was a little too slow. By the time we got to the wedding and they still hadn't figured it out, I was just like, I threw my arms up and I was just like this is, I cannot deal with this. So for me, that slow burn was a little too slow, but I mean, I liked it better in season 1 and I loved season 1. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And this is where some of the book to show difference comes in, where like they had to make changes because then it would have been way too close to season 1 with some elements. But I kind of wish some things they had kept in because it would have made some of the issues make more sense. But I am in between the two of you where like some of the subplots, I was like, oh my God, the Featheringtons, I don't want to talk to you at all. Like this, I know why they have to be there because we need some pen stuff. I totally understand. But I also just like, I like Colin and Penelope. And so I was like, I enjoy this more of the two of you. And I get like knowing now that season 3 is going to be Colin and Penelope and not Benedict. Margaret.
Thank God. What?
I don't know why I just called you Margaret.
That's okay. I know what you're saying.
I've never called you Margaret in my life. But yeah, they I think it made a lot more sense as to why those pieces were in there. But I do think that like watching it the second time, the slow parts in the middle after the wedding didn't feel as slow anymore.
Well, there's only 2 episodes after the wedding. Wedding was what, episode 6 or something like that? There were what, 8 total?
Oh, that's true. So
I should have prepared for this, right?
Maybe it's like 4 and 5, 3, 4 and 5. The first time I saw it felt like there was stuff they could have edited. It's a weird season in that like it feels they could have used 2 more episodes, but also it felt like parts of it were slow. Does that make sense?
Yes, but here's my question. It's just like pandemic life. Like it's slow and then super fast, right? How do we feel about the distinct lack of sex compared to season 1? Like once Daphne and the Duke are married, it's just like 2 solid episodes of boning. Like, and this, we really didn't get that much. And I think like that's the story they're telling, right? And I think they tried to use Benedict's story to spice it up, but like nobody cares. So no, whatever.
Bless his heart.
He's the worst. Oh, he's just like, so woe is me. Like, I'm like, whatever. Nobody has time for you.
And they didn't have anything to do. They're like, let's have him try drugs. Like they just did. They were like, let's do wacky stuff.
And then he ends up quitting the art school at the end. So it was like for nothing. It was just like a big, I don't know. But my point is like, was that disappointing to any of you? Because at first I was kind of like, oh, like I like this hot, slow burn stuff, but this isn't exactly why I tune into Bridgerton, you know?
I was expecting there to be a lot more. And then when there wasn't, I wasn't as disappointed as a lot of people. I was, so I was just at the pool and I was talking to a friend and she said that was actually one of the things she liked about it, where she was like, yeah, the other stuff is fun, but for this particular storyline, it didn't work.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have worked.
You could watch this season with your mom.
For all,
but like not season one.
Exactly. For all there was no sex scene, naked sex scenes, right? There were a number of very emotionally intense moments that I thought was a nice stand-in for the sex that still drew me in. The most notable one being, which is also an important scene in the book for different reasons, when they're in the garden and Kate
the bee
gets stung by the bee. It was so well done. It could have been like comical. It could have been easily poorly done.
I mean, in the book, it's a little comical.
And didn't he like suck on her breast to like try to suck out the venom or something?
Poison, yes, to suck out the venom.
He's having a panic attack, but the way Julia Quinn writes it is you don't really realize you're just like, why is he freaking out? I don't know. I mean, like, I think we know in the book at that point why he's freaking out, but in the show, they did a really good job showing someone who's really affected mentally by the situation with his dad. And I mean, both of them acted the heck out of that scene.
I thought Jonathan Bailey was incredible. That episode, I thought was an incredible episode of television. I thought that Jonathan Bailey was incredible in that episode. And I thought, and I have my IMDb and I still don't know her name. The woman who played Violet, I thought was amazing with her in labor and like, get him out of here. It's not his decision. Like, this is my decision kind of thing. And then the aftermath with her grief and depression, when she's like, that baby that didn't have the grace to kill me kind of lines. I thought that she was just heartbreaking. I thought she was so good. She was so incredible.
Yeah. And it's actually really interesting thinking about that scene after learning about it in season 1, when Daphne and Eloise are talking about it.
Like, aren't you afraid? I remember Mama screaming, that kind of thing.
Like, that night was so awful. And then you see it and you're like, oh, wow, this is, it was just good. And the one thing I wanted to mention about Simone Ashley in like the bee scene and the various high tension scenes, she does a lot of, and this is a positive, a lot of really excellent face acting, where like her face is very still, but yet you can still get what emotion she's trying to portray. And it's like with her eyes or just like little facial tics that I thought was like, it was just brilliantly done.
Yeah, she's really fantastic. Good. Let me ask you both a question. This is something that I thought, it kind of bothered me through it. And I don't know if it's just me. So I was hoping to get some either confirmation or like, no, you're crazy. So the whole thing with like Kate and Anthony is they both feel that like every decision they make has to be for their family and out of their like sense of duty, right? Which I totally understand for Kate. With Anthony, they try to set it up with a couple montages of him like working so late at night on the books and all of this stuff. But the whole point, or at least half of season 1, was him running away from his responsibility as the Viscount. Remember, Violet had to several times go into his office and give him talks about, are you the Viscount or not? Yeah. Are you the head of this house or not? Because it seems to me like you just want to run around with your opera singer.
He has a line, and you're absolutely right. And he has a line in episode 1 where he's like, I'm the Viscount, and whoever I marry will be the head of this family, and she'll shepherd, the female head of the family. She'll shepherd all of my sisters to their comments. It's like, dude, first of all, you have brothers to produce heirs. Secondly, Violet is not going anywhere and she's doing that fine. So it didn't make a ton of sense. So I completely agree.
Yeah, but I struggled with his, after episode 2, like I was saying, I got it. He would rather just marry someone he didn't love out of duty, because then he wouldn't have to deal with the devastation if something happened. Like, love is too dangerous, right? It's too risky. And that I understood. But this whole idea where everything I've done, every choice I've made has been for my family. And like, it just didn't ring true to me with the events of season 1, where he's like a famous rake himself.
There's even a scene in season 1 where Hastings, right, the Duke of Hastings has to marry, and he's like pointing to Anthony saying, hey, you need to do this too. And he's like, I have something you don't have, brothers. And it's
exactly. Yeah. So that bothered me kind of as a motivation for him. I just didn't feel like the show had earned that.
Yeah. I mean, another way to think about it is that like it is separating his role as a Viscount in terms of like doing the books and taking care of the estate, and his role as a Viscount for marrying and producing heirs. And I feel like what he was running away from in season 1 was the marrying and producing heirs bit, until they wanted to explain why he didn't want to fall in love. And they sort of set it up because his heart was broken by the opera singer. I think that the one piece, again, if you don't mind me bringing up book stuff, I think the one piece that they took out of the show that's in the book is that he thinks he's going to die at 40.
Oh, that's right.
And so, like, when his father
Why? Because his dad died young?
Because he thinks he's anaphylactic. He's going to have anaphylactic shock like his father.
Oh.
Yeah, so they did a good job in the show of being like, he doesn't want to inflict that kind of pain on a loved one by falling in love if something were to happen to him. But they never quite take that step in the show that says it's because he thinks he's going to die.
You know, if they had done that, I would have bought it a lot more. And there's so much stuff in Bridgerton where actually some stuff doesn't make sense to me, but it's because I don't have a kind of male perspective. I remember in season 1, I thought the Duke being like, I won't marry someone I love and be happy because I have to blow up my own life to get revenge on a guy who's dead. I was like, this is so dumb, makes no sense. And Bay's like, that's what men do. He's like, 100%. This is real. Men would rather blow up their own lives to spite someone who does not care because, like, to them, it's important. And then what you're saying, Priya, I remember most of the men on the Riley side of my family, my father's side, died young because we have a history of heart problems. And when my dad lived past the age his father had died, I remember it wasn't like a midlife crisis, but he definitely talked about like, I honestly did not think I would survive this long. Like, just because of the history of men in my family. Yeah, it was very surprising to him.
They also mention in the book that it's not just his father, that because I just read this, his uncle died early as well. Yeah. And then some other family member also died.
Okay. So there's like a history of men in the family not being long lived. That would make so much more sense. They should have left that in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if part of the reason they didn't was because they were establishing this whole like head of the household thing.
Well, yeah, to be in like duality with Kate, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can see that.
In the book, Kate's issues are partially head of the household, but they're also partially because of this traumatic incident that they didn't include at all. Is
this the thing about thunderstorms? There was something about thunderstorms. I've heard people talk about this.
But it's about she witnessed in the books, Anthony is not the one who witnessed his father dying. I think it's one of the two of the younger kids.
Oh, interesting.
And then Kate is the one who witnesses her mother dying, and that's what her traumatic thunderstorm memory is. But they changed it, and again, I think it's because they really needed to strip down the complications, and they also probably thought there's like a level of trauma with what Kate's story is that they just didn't know. Like, it would just be really hard for two people who have this level of trauma to sort of figure their stuff out in the course of 8 episodes.
I would like to. We've talked about a bunch of characters. I want to give a shout out to Edwina.
Oh, yeah.
Because especially in season 2, when I rewatched season 2, the first time when we got to the wedding episode, I was like, I like that girl. She's good. And so my season 2 rewatch, I purposely paid a lot of attention to her. And you get a lot more hints of like her having this like kind of spine of steel earlier that I hadn't picked up on. But I love this theme of the season of being like Edwina learning who she is. It's kind of like season 1, right? It's all about people learning who they really are. And it was like Edwina learning who she is and what actually would make her happy. And I just really loved that she had her own arc independent of Kate. And at the end of the day, she's like, I'm going to do what makes me happy.
I was trying to figure out how to pronounce her name because even though I am South Asian, I'm not 100% sure. But it's Charitra, I think. Chandran is her name. And so she was also, I agree. I think that change was also really great. Like, just how she sort of owned her own life at the end.
And then she's going to marry that prince.
Yeah.
From Germany, and it's going to be great. One weird thing about Edwina I pinged on and loved the whole season, which is super weird. I try not to comment on people's bodies, but I have to say her breasts had some like stretch marks, and I loved it because how often do you see that? They didn't put makeup on it to get rid of it. Like, this just happens if you like overnight grow boobs when you're younger. Like, you get little like stretch marks on your boobs, and they didn't try to hide it. And as someone who that happened to, I thought that was actually, that made me happy. It just made me happy. They didn't put makeup on it and try to hide it or anything. And like, it's all on display. And I thought that was a nice piece of realism.
Yeah. And can I actually say, I think generally in terms of appearance on the show, and I think we said this last year with season 1, is I really appreciate that they have clearly lighting designers and cinematographers.
Yes.
Great of color on the show and are really good about this. And I bring this up because like, that's a slight tangent, but like if you watch the new version of Around the World in 80 Days, they do not know how to light the gentleman that plays Passepartout, who's very dark skinned, an amazing actor, but he's playing off against David Tennant and this red-haired woman with pale skin. And like there are scenes where like you cannot see his face in the scene. Whereas in Bridgerton, they're just amazing.
Everyone look fantastic. Do you know who my favorite character? I think my absolute favorite character still remains Lady Danbury, who I am just like obsessed with. And I even happened on an audiobook. I didn't know she was narrating it, but as soon as she started talking, I was freaking out in my office. And Bay's like, "What are you doing?"
Was it a Talia Hibbert book?
It was called Island Queen.
Oh, okay, so different one.
It's about a woman who basically like starts off as an enslaved person in one of the Caribbean islands. And then basically just through hard work and tenacity ends up creating like her own kind of like little empire on her island and becoming one of the wealthiest women kind of in the British Empire. And it was really, but she reads it and she's amazing. And as soon as she started talking, I was just like transported.
Yeah, so that happened to me because I was listening to Talia Hibbert's Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which is the first in a trilogy. And they changed, for various reasons, I don't know why they changed it, but they changed the readers for the second two books in the series. But for this one, I was like listening and I was like, who is this voice? I cannot tell who this is, but their voice is amazing. Who is this person? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Lady Danbury.
Well, what you're saying about lighting, as a very white person, that is not something I always ping on. I will say everyone looked stunning. And I will also say I married someone who is still a white guy, but Bay, a lot of people think that he is maybe like Egyptian or something. He just has like kind of a olive complexion or whatever. It is very difficult to get pictures of the two of us because I'm so pale. And so when we had our wedding photographer, we were like, look at us, make notes, like get ready because we need to look good. And it's either I'm completely washed out or like you're saying, you can't see his face. That happens to us all the time. So I can't even imagine like for someone who is actually dark complected, the challenges with that. It must be so incredibly frustrating in Hollywood.
Yeah. And I think that's just one of the great things about this show that's like, on the side, right? Like, I think it's emphasizing the need to have people who understand how to do sets and things for.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that behind the camera reflects the same dedication to diversity as in front of the camera. I mean, Shonda is not going to mess around when it comes to, although the wigs in season 1 were not good. Just saying.
Is this a good time to sort of, and this is something we talked about before we started the podcast, so I don't want to forget to retouch on it, but should we revisit the conversation about colorism that people were having about Bridgerton after season 1 and talk about how it was for you this time, Priya?
Yeah. So I think most of the stuff, the scuttlebutt that I listened to was a lot of deeply appreciative South Asian women, especially because I'm in this chat with like 12 of my female cousins, that they didn't pick someone who was quote unquote fair and lovely, which is like the Indian thing.
I thought that was incredible to have a dark skinned lead.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that was influenced by the feedback they got the season before. And if it is, I'm glad they're willing to listen and make choices based on that. So I really, really appreciate that. And just, it's not really so much about colorism, but all the South Asian touches in the show were really great. And I know that they were like from all sorts of regions of India. Like there are things where like they call their dad Appa, but that's one part of India, but they use language from another part of India. And so it's just sort of this like amalgamation. But I think, again, I was talking to my cousins and my friends and they're like, we just felt seen. And it was just like really nice to be like, my favorite part was the part where she's putting oil in her sister's hair, which is a deeply comforting thing my mother would do for us on like a Friday night. And it's just something we would do for one another. And it's really nice. Or the Holi ceremony or the conversation about tea.
Yeah, like your tea is terrible because she's been drinking chai. She doesn't like English tea.
Yeah. So all of that was just really nice. And then even like the clothing they were wearing.
Oh my God, the colors. Oh, now I thought it was very interesting. Edwina was very much still like pastel city, right? She was like trying to fit in with the like the Bridgertons, like perfect pastel Regency England. But I just loved Kate was like, I'm going to wear teal. I'm going to wear bright orange. I'm going to wear purple. Oh, stunning. So stunning.
Really great. And so I just thought that attention to detail was nice. And I know not everyone was happy with like most of the people in my circles really appreciate the South Asian touches. I think there are other parts of the community because we're not a monolith. Like everyone's a little bit different. Wish that they had tried to be a little bit more accurate. Like if they are a family coming from this particular part of India, they would call their father this. They would do this. But I think they were trying to reach out to a large range of the diaspora.
Right.
And this is just me thinking that, not knowing necessarily from. But it just felt like there's some intentionality instead of, because if they're going to pick South Asian actresses for these roles, it feels weird that they wouldn't have South Asian people help dictate the elements as well.
Yeah.
And so, but I just haven't read a lot of articles about it. And I will say, I kind of, because I wanted to like the season, I kind of stayed away from critical pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I will admit that like, we are not a monolith. Not everyone thinks the way I did or the way my cousins did. But generally though, all I've heard is feeling seen and really glad that they were there. And also I'm kind of glad that it seems like we're going to see Kate and Anthony together happy in season 3.
We kind of have to, right? I mean, like with Daphne and the Duke, it's like, oh, well, they live so far off and like hand wave, he's busy. But I mean, Anthony's the Viscount. He runs the place. So Priya, can you remind me of the significance of the design? If you know, like, I don't want to assume you know everything, right? Of the design they were painting on the floor when they were going to host their kind of like joint ball. Isn't that something too, like of South Asia, the design that they were painting?
That wasn't actually something I thought about because I feel like they had done that in season 1 in other episodes where they did artwork on the floor. But there is a practice in some parts of South Asian culture where you do something called rangoli, which is before, at least my family does it before Diwali and before some of our major holidays, where you take sand and you draw sand art on the ground. Or now you can get these things where they're like preset kits.
Like decals.
Like decals, and you just put them down and they look pretty and stuff like, and I took mine and turned it into a painting and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't actually think about that as being one of the sort of nods to it, because I feel like when Lady Danbury held a ball in season 1, they were also doing the floor art.
I had come across it as referenced in an article and I couldn't remember, but I did as a viewer who is not familiar with South Asian like cultural references and things like that, I appreciated that they didn't feel the need to shoehorn exposition to tell me about it. Oh, well, we do this for blah, blah, blah. No, like if you're interested, go look it up and learn about it. It felt very organic. It felt organic.
I just like how Irina was like, have you read this in South Asian Bengali author? And Anthony's like, I don't actually read.
Well, how wonderful. I love to talk to people about books I've read. Oh, she's such a sweet girl. She's such a nice girl. Did you guys notice that Anthony had a real glow up between season 1 and season 2? He looks like really different.
I was not happy that the sideburns were trimmed back. I really wanted the aggressive Anthony sideburns and was disappointed not to get it. I felt that diminished his sex appeal for me.
He was very Colin Firth in Pride and Prejudice in season 1. Yeah. And then in season 2, he was just like more kind of typical beefcake.
Yeah. Yeah.
I asked my cousin in India, I was like, I asked everyone, I'm doing this podcast. What was your favorite thing? What was your least favorite thing? And my cousin came back and was like, the hotness of Jonathan Bailey. She was like, that was one of the best things about this season was the
Priya polled all of India, and these were the results. We love Jonathan Bailey.
Actually, my 12 cousins who live in Singapore, to America.
Bay had a really interesting question that I don't know if any of us are qualified to answer, but he was wondering if there was any pushback against the actress who played Kate with her. We do see her breasts in the last episode, and there are sex scenes depicted with her. And, the film industry in India is much more conservative. You don't even have actors kissing a lot of the time. So I would be interested to find out if the international press has any pushback on her.
A couple things. I will say that the Indian movie industry used to be
okay, good.
Even it's on there. So a lot of the modern movies there, and I will admit that being raised in 1990s South Asian household where you change the channel if they even you're watching an American show and someone's kissing. Modern Indian movies are sex scenes. They're out of
okay, good. Well, I just didn't want any negative attention on her for that, because I would take that role. It's the best show on the highest rated show on Netflix. Don't turn that down. Yeah, I'm sure there are groups that there's always groups that are why would you do that? But she's also an actress that was on Sex Education. And so really, I feel and then also Netflix India has a whole slate of shows that are there's so many good shoys on Netflix from India. Yeah, and so they're just Sacred Games or things that are really violent and and that I think crosses because they are private, they are able to cross the line that the censor boards in India don't really control, I think. Oh, okay.
So I think, again, I'm not an expert. I don't really understand how this stuff works in India, but my sense is that things are not completely open, but a little bit more open.
Well, people talk a lot about how Netflix had changed television, right? And the ways it kind of revolutionized the industry. And for me, as an American, one of the things I think is incredible is how much international television we now get. I mean, look at Squid Game as a Korean show. And there's also some amazing Indian series on there. There's some amazing things I've seen from Mexico and South America. And just I can't think of any other time where we had such access to international television. And that's pretty incredible because our media is beamed out all over the world and has been for a long time, but that is not the case with things coming into us.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool that we can see things from other areas of the world.
Yeah. I will say, and this is going back to Bridgerton a little bit, I think that's also the other reason why Netflix has really led, despite all their other issues that they are having right now behind the scenes, some of which I do not love. I think having someone like Shonda Rhimes brought into their fold gives them the opportunity to do things that other streaming networks are now considering the norm, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the other piece this made me remember was there was a little bit of a class conversation this season as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the father was
he was like a tradesman,
a clerk, and
Eloise becomes a revolutionary.
Oh yeah. And Mrs. Sharma's parents are major jerks.
Oh my god, and it was Giles.
Yeah,
it was Giles is an asshole. Oh no, Anthony Stewart Head. How could you?
That was one of the scenes where I feel like it's very easy to have, I don't know, bad characters who you're supposed to dislike the first time they come on scene and they spew all this nastiness at the dinner table, which is, I don't know if you kind of think no one would act that way. And you kind of you're kind of thinking I'm being manipulated, this isn't good writing. I don't know, but they really didn't have time. I think it was fine, but that was a marriage that was a white man and an Indian woman, and it was sort of not portrayed in a very positive light. But I don't know. I think it was just for reasons of plot, right? They had to be the bad guys. They had to be the meanies, right? So
I don't know, Kristen, seeing all these people posting about after Trump got elected, how awkward Thanksgiving dinner was because you always have the
that's
racist uncles and stuff like that. It did not feel not real. It felt very realistic to me.
Yeah, the family reunion, they started in on their daughter almost immediately. They're just horrible people.
But what a fist pump moment when speaking about classism, Anthony, who is has the highest rank of anyone there. And it's not even his own house, but he's basically like, get the fuck out.
Yeah,
and they have to do what he
true.
says.
Yeah.
Like someone actually leveraging their power to us as an audience member for good, to put someone like, to be like, this is not acceptable, get out.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to complain too much.
Is that the scene after he leaves where he and Kate are in a room and he goes, you're the bane of my existence and the object of my desires? Or is that later?
He says that twice to her. It's in like the last episode. And I think he does it because she also says, you vex me twice.
Which didn't make a ton of sense. They were still saying those things to each other.
This is what I'm talking about, Kristen. I was like, get it on, kids.
At that point, I was like, this has gone on a little too long. It doesn't make sense anymore. They clearly have caught feelings. I mean, the whole bee scene and everything. But Priya, like before we get too far, like, do you want to just give people a rundown on how the book differed from the show? Just like the broad sketches.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I'll try and do my best. So in the book, Anthony is clearly, again, also he wants to marry Edwina because she's like perfection, whatever. And he still has to get Kate to like him in order to marry Edwina. And so they go to the house party and everyone's at the house party. But he finds himself like weirdly attracted to Kate. So he follows her into the garden. And that's when the bee sting happens. And he's basically just like, as we mentioned before, trying to suck the venom out. And he gets compromised by Lady Featherington, his mother, and someone else. And at that point, they're like, his mom obviously knows what happens because she's like, oh shit, there was a bee. I know why he's acting this way. But everybody else doesn't. And he's like, well, of course I'm going to marry Kate. So they get compromised and have to get married.
Oh.
So they get married. And then he tells her though straight up though, that there's never going to be love. I'm never going to love you. He's like, we're just getting married. It's clearly we're attracted to each other, but I don't love you. So they get married and then they have some kind of fight, which I know I can't remember what it is right now, but they have some kind of fight and he realizes he's a jerk and he realizes he loves her basically. And he basically starts a fight. And so he disappears and then she goes to look for him and he's not there. And so she goes on a carriage ride with Edwina and her beau, who's this like cerebral library bookish guy.
Oh, this is very different.
Yeah. And the carriage gets out of control and flips and
shit.
Kate gets trapped. And so Anthony, realizing he loves her, goes to go find her in the park, sees the carriage thing happen and thinks she's dead. And so he goes to the carriage, sees she's not dead, but is like, at that point, he's like, it was supposed to be me. It was supposed to be me. And Kate's like, the fuck are you talking about? And that's when he explains, I thought I was going to die at 40 and that's why. And so then they end up together.
I'm glad I didn't die at 40.
Yeah.
I'm over 40.
But there's all this beautiful backstory with Kate where like, she's like 4 years old and she goes to see like her mom has caught like lung fever. Oof. And in the middle of a storm, she goes, no one's paying attention because they know the mom is going to die. And so Kate comes into the room and right as like lightning strikes a tree outside their window, her mom sits up, gives her last gasp of breath and dies. And so Kate is like horribly traumatized by storms. So the intense scenes between them are in these moments when she's just like, where he's kind to her because like he finds her in the library during a storm and she's curled up under a table. And he's just like trying to coax her back from being like frozen. And it's just really kind to her. And then he's the one who figures out after they get married, okay, there's something in your subconscious that you don't know about. And so they go and they ask Mary what happened. And Mary's like, we didn't know these were still happening to you. Mm. And that's when there's this very sweet thing with Mary where she's like, when I got married, I asked you if it was okay if I became your mom. I asked your dad. And then I went to your mother's gravestone and told her I was going to be the best mother I could be.
And then I was like, suck it.
Yeah. And so that's why Mary, there's this whole thing with Mary where she feels grief. And that's why I like that they had that scene with Mary in the show. So there's just like little things that are different, like not little things, but like backstory that they change. Also to give Edwina, I think, more to do.
Yeah.
And to make the self-sacrificial nature of their personalities a little bit more apparent. One
of the things I loved that they did for Edwina, like you're saying, she develops all along that you start to see this backbone and this like, but I feel like her character isn't fully truly established until the wedding episode.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Where King George, of course, is confused, right? He's mentally unwell and he sees the fireworks that have gone off as a big anticlimax, and thinks that it's his wedding day. And Edwina so gently, she did something called validation, right? With people who have memory issues or whatever, where rather than contradicting them, you sort of acknowledge what they're saying and then kind of bring in like, well, wouldn't it better if you go to rest, and it's just an incredible moment for her. And it really puts you in her corner. Well, you're already in her corner. She's had this horrible thing happen where she's getting married and
everyone's lied to her. Like, I totally understand her anger at Kate. I felt like that could also come off really dumb, like why they're sisters. But like Kate does lie to her often. And doesn't tell her who she is.
Kate. I mean, I was so angry at Kate. I really was. And that they were all in a morass. This is what I loved plot wise, is like, you understand why Antony proposes to Edwina. In fact, it goes back even further than this, where he invites Edwina, Kate, and Mary to I forget the name of the house, but it's their like country seat.
Oh, yeah. Right? What is that thing called?
Everybody knows that he's going to propose to her from the start. So then when he doesn't, and it's the end, and I think that's the scene you're talking about, Priya, where Kate is sort of massaging her hair, rubbing her hair, and she's so devastated. You're like, Antony has already got himself in too deep. He can't pull out now. He has to continue this ridiculous story to himself about how she's the diamond and he's the Viscount and they have to get married, which doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't make any. I mean, what is this diamond thing? First of all, it's not historically accurate. Not that
that's
it matters.
Not in season one. Do they ever refer to Daphne as that?
No, I mean they do. They refer to her as a diamond of the first quarter, but that's just a Regency expression. Somebody who's designated as the diamond, and as it was imbued. But that's what causes a problem. Even Lady Whistledown says, "Why do we do this? Why are we doing this? Why can't we?" She's spurred by Eloise to try to be a little bit more revolutionary. But like, why don't we just appreciate women for their qualities? And can I talk for a second before we get too far away about the Featheringtons subplot?
Can I ask a super quick question about the book still? Do all of the Bridgerton books follow the romance trope of like get married and then fall in love? Is that like the theme? Because it sounds like 1 and 2 both have that. No.
Benedict's has its own host of problems. Benedict's is not like that. Penelope and Colin obviously are not like they're very different
because they have this pre-existing relationship. Right?
Eloise is weird.
Like, I can't wait to see what they do with her. I love her.
Thereve set the seeds for something that I don't know if they're gonna go through. Like, it'll be really interesting if they do what the books do.
Okay, I just had that because like romance, there's like subgenres of romance, and I know that get married and then fall in love is a very classic.
If we get Francesca is also very different. Like,
if Francesca even bothers to show up for her season,
they recast her.
I know, but she's gone for almost all of season 1 too. So it's funny. Okay, so Kristen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail from you wanting to talk about the Featheringtons.
The Featheringtons was a very interesting subplot that I was invested in, but I turned out to be like a lot more scheming than the writers in the writer's room because I thought all of this crap was going to go on behind the scenes and it was going to be this big reveal. So I outsmarted myself. Basically, I was playing 4-dimensional chess. Right. So let me tell you some things about the Featheringtons. First of all, off topic from that, Lady Featherington, right, maneuvers
Polly Walker.
Yes, Polly Walker. She maneuvers her older daughter. Oh, what is her name? Philippa? No, the other one. Not Penelope.
Prudence.
She maneuvers Prudence into the orangery party. She then arranges for him to be found there. Lord Featherington, the new Lord Featherington. That's his name. It's his title, right? Lord Featherington.
Yes, he's the new Lord Featherington.
Yeah, the new guy, the tall drink of water, right? And she, based on
that guy, really?
No, not at all. No, bless his heart. Like, he's fine. He's a perfectly attractive guy, but not. It's just coming up with something to describe him. He is tall. Anyway, she's tall too. This entrapment, it didn't make any dang sense because they lived together in the same dang house and they are cousins.
And they're never going to be alone together.
And it was just so easy to explain away, but yet she brings this pressure to bear and somehow it sticks. Like somehow he feels he does have to get engaged to her.
Okay, but the best part is when he's like, joke's on you, I'm poor as fuck. Like, I don't have any money either.
No. Okay, so let me tell you this whole thing. So I didn't believe it when he said he was poor. So he gives this ruby necklace, right? First, he gives this ruby necklace. And do you remember the jewelry guy?
Yeah.
Who was looking at the ring? Then then you think.
Do you remember who the jewelry guy is played by, Kristen?
No. And I feel like I recognized him at the time.
Isn't it Mr. Hurst?
Oh, is it Mr. Hurst? Is it Rupert Vansittart?
I'm pretty sure. I'll look it up. But I was just like, holy shit. Because he's asking for the cake when they're doing the ring.
I remember recognizing him, but I don't remember who it was. Yes, but that's an incredible Easter egg. But okay, so he's examining the ruby necklace and Jack comes in and he's like, no, don't do that. But then he goes, the stones are wonderful clarity. And you, as the textual reader who believes Jack that he's poor, thinks, oh, this jewelry guy is terrible at his job. But I was like, nay, this means that he has lied to Lady Featherington to try to find a way out of the engagement to Prudence because he doesn't want to get married to her. And he's playing a long game, like a joke, he loves messing around with her, basically. So I thought the jeweler guy was real. They're saying the rubies were real. And that was the secret that Jack did not want to come out because he was playing this 4-dimensional chess. And I was so disappointed to be wrong. I can't even tell you. And I just thought it was so
unbelievable that anyone would be so bad at their job.
I wanted Polly Walker to be outmaneuvered by him pretending to be poor, basically.
It is Rupert Vansittart.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, Mr. Hurst.
and because Mary Bennett is in it. Wait, no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Gentleman Jack. She's in Gentleman Jack.
Yes.
I think. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
That's
it's all blending
together.
Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed.
Another reading for that scene is that he's a really good jeweler, but he's like, what if I can get money from this guy by saying it's real?
And it's just, I guess. But then she was like, if you're interested in buying any of the pieces, and he's like, maybe.
I also thought that he was very almost sexual with her, almost flirting with her. And I also thought that maybe he was just really kind of drawn in by her wiles and like really liked that and like wanted to spar with her. And I thought,
you mean the jeweler, Mr. Brooks?
No.
Jack. Lord Featherington.
Oh no, he was like at the end. He was like, "Let's run away together." He was definitely into the older lady thing. He was.
But I thought he was
going
to be like, turn out to be like, just kidding. I'm rich. Let's get married, and like for them to have like a happy ending in a way. So
I loved how that resolved, where he basically has to run, and she is like, "What about my daughter?" And she's just like, these are my daughters. I'm not leaving. Like you've really underestimated who I am."
It was a wonderful moment where she like redeems herself as a mother after all her nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I thought, so that's also another like interesting change because the Featheringtons, maybe you remember this better, Kristen, than I do, is I feel like they struggle with money for a while because the Lord Featherington is already dead before. Yeah. And before the books even start. And that Penelope somehow managed to save the household with her money as Lady Whistledown.
Oh, did she? I was wondering about that. Like, Penelope, come on, girl.
She pretends to get an inheritance from a relative.
Maybe they're saving that for season 3.
Maybe they'll bring that in, or they'll just be like, this is how they have money again, is because they actually stole from other people.
Right. Because Lady Featherington is like, we're keeping some of it, give everything else back and leave.
Yeah. Do you think they're gonna do a time jump?
Oh, I don't know.
Because in the books, there's a time jump.
In the books, they do.
Interesting.
Because they're like in their 20s and spinsters, quote unquote.
Well, and here's the worst part about it too. If you do go back and you do read the books, part of the reason they do the time jump is because Penelope has lost all this weight, and you're like, gosh,
they won't do that. I'm sure.
I know, of course, they won't do it on this show, but like it's such a cop out in the books. You're like, come on.
This is like in Sweet Valley High when Robin lost all that weight, and I was so mad because I loved that they had a fat character, and then they just like made her be thin and on the diving team or some bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? Nicola Coughlan is just gorgeous.
Oh, she's beautiful.
Oh my God. I love her so much. I get ads for her, like doing makeup ads and everything. And I'm like, yes, get that money, get those endorsements. You go, girl.
There's a scene early in the show where she's in mourning and she gets to wear sort of a Gloria Brown colored dress. And she looks incredible. And then you have to go back to the bright yellows. And you're just like, I can't wait until they let her dress herself. And she's just going to be a beautiful butterfly because
her
of
wig
all
is
that.
much better in season 2
should we
also.
Talk about, like the Penelope Eloise sort of storyline.
Yes, because I'm so invested in Penelope and Colin, even though I'm not sure he quite deserves her yet. I'm like really invested.
Yeah, it's just really because like she's still like, I don't know. The Penelope Lady Whistledown in the show, the show Lady Whistledown is a little bit meaner, I feel like, than she is in the book. And so I don't blame Eloise for her reaction because of what she had to do. But I also thought like the ways in which Penelope had to hide who she was from Eloise, who's like, the letters in this dog pamphlet, they match.
And she's like,
it's like, oh my God, why are you making my life so much harder? It was really.
I loved her hooking up with the modiste lady.
Yeah.
Who there's a lot of interesting stuff that they've hinted with her, how she's like not really French and she's basically just trying to make her own way. I hope that we get more info about her. I really enjoy her.
I kind of hope that she's the Benedict love interest, that they figure out a way for that.
But they've already like been together, right? He basically dumps her in the first episode of the season.
No, she
dumps I don't think he doesn't. She dumps him.
Right. He's like, hey, you ready to hang out? And she's like,
I'm busy.
I have far too much work to do.
Yeah. But I don't think they can do his story the way it's in the book.
Well, there's a lot of consent issues with his story, is my understanding.
Absolute pile of crap. It is a book that you will want to throw across the room. It is a book there is no excuse for it. I don't care what year it was written in. He's a monster and it's an awful story.
Awful. Yeah. I was just rereading it and I was like, oh my God, like this is not, yeah. So I think that's also probably why they're skipping it. And they might come back to it, is they want to give him more time to rehabilitate. They want to do more stuff with him to get him to a place where like
but nobody cares. They'll just continue giving him subplots. He'll meet someone and have his relationship in a subplot. I really think that. I do not think they're going to hang a whole season on Benedict. I really don't think they do. I do hope they have a time jump though eventually, because I think Gregory is a little cutie patootie and I can't wait for him to be like an adult and have his own plots, because that kid is a star. That kid's going to be a star.
A lot of really nice family moments in here. And then maybe we'll go back to Penelope and Eloise in a second, but like Ruth Gemmell, who's Mrs. Bridgerton, Lady Bridgerton, the mom, her talking to Anthony and then her listening to Anthony talk to Gregory. Really great. Where he's like, yes, I haven't really let us talk about dad that much. So
right in the feels. Yeah. Right in the feels.
And then as awful as Benedict is, the conversation where Benedict is talking to him about poetry before.
That hilarious. Yeah.
I thought that was really nice. As always, Eloise and Benedict conversations on the swings, I really love. I think they do that really well. Like the family conversation connection stuff.
Yeah. Is the Eloise Theo thing in the books?
No.
Or is that completely made up? Okay.
That's completely different. He was a cutie too.
He was cute too. That's what I was going to say.
That was an interesting element of Eloise's storyline. I have to say the prolonged and continued who is Lady Whistledown, I'm trying to find Lady Whistledown thing got on my nerves. I was just like, I can't believe we're doing this again. I can't believe we're caught in this loop again. But it was cat and mouse at that point with Penelope.
Exactly. I found it much more interesting because we know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Who it is.
I could see other people being interested in it. I just, for whatever reason, I
could see other people with bad taste thinking that was entertaining.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what's wrong with me. Sometimes I just refuse to be entertained. You know that feeling where you sit down and you're just like, you can't find anything you want to watch and you just like refuse to be entertained. I don't know.
Yeah. And you just like
I wouldn't
keep
say there's
scrolling
anything
through
wrong
Netflix
with you.
looking for something that you want to watch and you just can't find. And you're like, God, there's nothing on. And it's like, there's literally thousands of shows now. There's not just 4 channels anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think they tried to do those. I think this is you talking about like multiple plots at the end where there's like a lot of this mystery stuff that happens in the last like 4 episodes. It's so this cat and mouse with Penelope and Eloise, but then also the Featheringtons and Colin pretending to invest.
I love that. Everything with Will, the boxer guy, loved it. I actually liked Lord Featherington kind of linking up with his plot with the gentleman's club he was opening and how he like knew he was sketch. The Colin investing red herring, I totally fell for. Yeah. I really underestimated Colin with that. And I was like, oh God, please don't let him be dumb and do this and get fleeced. And then they turned it around in the last episode and I was so happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that conversation, speaking of like Colin being confusing, is that conversation he had with his friends with a statue is very reminiscent to a scene in Benedict's book.
Okay, now remind me the statue.
It's after the wedding when they're all out and Penelope is just sort of like wandering around and she overhears Colin say, I wasn't.
I'll never court her. Oh, it broke my heart.
Yeah, so in the books, he's just come back from his tour and he's with Benedict and he's standing outside with his brothers and he's like, I will never marry Penelope Featherington. And Pen walks out of their house as he says that. And she's like, I never said you were going to marry me.
I never asked you.
I never asked you for that. And she's like, I'm walking the 4 doors down to my house. Go away.
Yeah.
So I kind of wish that she had that moment to walk up to him and be like, hey, but she was kind of on a mission of trying to figure out where Eloise went off to at that point.
Well, that's very like, she's not handsome enough to tempt me kind of thing, right? Where it's just like, oh, you hear someone say something awful.
What did you think of him going to see Marina and like Sir Philip being a nerd, them nerding out?
I rolled my eyes because I actually hated the Marina subplot. When I did my rewatch, I will not lie, I fast forwarded through a lot of that because I didn't feel the need to relive it.
Stressed me out.
Yeah. But I thought it was great. She's like, she's kind of a bitch, but he needed to hear it, right? Yeah. She's like, look around. I have 2 kids. I'm the head of this house. Like, you're not going to find anything here. I don't have anything to give you. But she was kind of mean. But the guy she married seemed nice, right?
Priya, is that the Sir Philip? Are you allowed to tell me?
Yeah. So this is a Eloise. This is a spoiler, but like they're playing the long game, I think, with Philip. And
the name of her book is To Sir Philip with Love. And that's all I know about it because I have never read it. But I did ping on the fact that his name was Philip. And he's a smarty pants like her.
Yeah. And the thing is that Marina, we've talked about this last time, is Marina exists in this world in the books. We just never meet her the way we have. And I'm glad that we got to see her again because I think it'll provide the breadcrumbs for if they do it the same way, for what happens to her to make feel real and to feel honest and like not let's just move this woman out of the way for something else. And I don't want to like spoil for people who are listening to this and like want to know what happens. Like,
I mean, I just ripped my headphones off because you said it was going to be a spoiler for Eloise. I don't know if you guys saw, I'm very backlit because of the light in my office, but you said this is a spoiler with Eloise. And I went, and I ripped my headphones off. So I didn't hear anything you just said.
No, I'm being very, very careful.
Okay, good.
Very, very careful what I say because I am just interested to see if we get to Eloise, how they do it. Because again, we only have, I feel like they renewed through season 4. And so,
I was going to ask you guys, so Netflix, of course, famous for just like canceling shows. And if it doesn't Bridgerton, hugely popular, right? However, Bridgerton also probably hugely expensive. This cast keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at some point, it's going to be so many people that it's just going to cost buckets of money. So how many seasons do you guys think we'll get? I assume there's like a 5-year plan, but they're renewed through 4.
Yeah, I would assume that they want to get through, like, I mean, and that's the thing with skipping Benedict. Like, I don't know how they're going to do it because like if they skip Benedict,
they're not skipping him. He'll have his little love subplot. I don't like, what else are they going to do with him?
Yeah.
He doesn't have the decency to be gay. Like, what other possible interesting thing could Benedict do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the thing is,
he's so boring.
He could be bi.
He had plenty of opportunity. He went to parties where people were literally hooking up. Dudes were hooking up with dudes. And I was like, now we're getting somewhere. I just rubbed my hands together. Now we're getting someplace. Benedict's going to become interesting. And he has a threesome with 2 girls. How heteronormative.
Yeah.
I was really disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know what they're going to do with season 4. Like, again,
we don't know what's going to happen with season 3. All we know is Colin and Penn is a focus, but like, we have no idea what anyone else is going to be doing.
Yeah. Like, I'm just wondering if they'll build in like a Benedict subplot to get him done and then do Eloise. Because Eloise and Colin and Penn, there's like a point where some of the stuff with Eloise overlaps with the end of Colin and Penn, because her whole shift happens like at the end of Colin and Penn's book. Because
if I had to guess, I would say season 4 will be Eloise.
Yeah. So Priya, like, is there anything that's been on your mind that you also really want to get off your chest before, because I'm keeping an eye on time and I don't want to like cut you off if there are other things.
I mean,
it's your chance.
No, I think we covered most of it. I just I had this conversation with another friend where we were saying that Bridgerton as a phenomenon has really sort of exploded, right? Like, they're now doing these like experiences in cities where people can go and dress up. And
I knew someone. I have a friend who went to the like Queen's Ball or whatever they did in DC.
Yeah. And I've heard different opinions. People who are like, it was a money grab. Other people are like, it was delightful. And, you know, they're not doing all this stuff. And my friend and I were having a conversation about Bridgerton as romance and as romance becoming mainstream, and the way that science fiction and fantasy really became mainstream and okay to be a part of after Game of Thrones, and how those of us who sort of started out when it was like a hidden interest, right? Like, you couldn't talk about it. Like, if you talked about it, people judged you. And so you sort of like kept it close to your vest, about how all of a sudden it's super popular and you feel like something you were bullied about for ages when you were younger, all of a sudden it's okay. And you feel like, why did I go through all that stuff when I was younger? And so there's an element of like, we were having a discussion about how that felt, and how like we are really excited that this stuff is happening, that we're getting things like Sweet Magnolias and Virgin River, which are really candy and they're really a confection, right? And in a way that like we never thought we ever could, because rom-coms were basically rom-coms. These are just slightly different from rom-coms. They're just set up differently. And so I thought that was just like an interesting sort of, using the word discourse right now seems really pretentious, but like,
that is a very interesting point. And, you know, as someone who is also a big nerd, but I never really was like, I would read Dragon Riders of Pern and like do book reports on it. I did a book report. I did a book report on Star Trek novels, Star Trek novelizations in elementary school, and like D&D becoming so popular with Stranger Things. Like, I've been playing that since I was a kid. So for me, I'm just like kind of delighted. It's interesting for me to hear that viewpoint, which is not something I'd thought about.
Being delighted, but also slightly mad and wary about it. Like,
now you know how hipsters feel. I liked it before it was cool
and proprietary. And I'll say, this is a huge Star Wars fan. I put myself in a lot of situations in high school where I had countdowns, I had decorations on my lockers.
Oh my God, you're so cute. I love you.
I was a broadcasting nerd about the Phantom Menace. And, you know, I took the teasing in good cheer. I never felt bullied, but it also always felt like you knew that you were doing something that other people weren't vocal about.
Yeah.
Even though lots of people really love Star Wars, you know?
Yeah.
But it was just like, so we had a little commiseration thing on there. And then the other piece we didn't talk about was the colonialism aspect of this, which they didn't really touch on. Like, I think in season 1, they talked a little bit about being Black in Britain and how having a Duke that was Black was sort of like a big deal. Like, Lady Danbury has that conversation. Like, they have that conversation about your role and who you are. But we didn't really touch on colonialism in this at all. It just sort of was like, oh yeah, India exists. And I mean, I think there is that layered conversation here, right? Because I appreciate that they were allowed to just come in and be characters on the show.
Exactly, yeah.
But at the same time, that backstory is very real. That stuff that was happening, and that like their relationship with England is is going to be naturally different. And you get a little bit of that with Kate being like, I don't feel like I belong here. I want to go back to India and be a governess. But they don't really actually touch on that very much. And especially when they have discussions about tea, because tea and the East India Tea Company, they're all that's all sort of part of it, right? And so, and I will say my Indian history is also like very, like it could be deeper than it is, which is why I just second guessed saying the company's name. But I think it would have been nice to have a little bit more, but I also recognize that in 8 episodes where you have a certain amount of thing to do, that there isn't the space for that conversation. But what I'm hoping is like how season 1 convinced people to think more about the queen and who she was as maybe being someone with African heritage, who also was part of this big royal family that enslaved people, even though other groups hold her up as like the first Black queen of England, like, stuff like that. This will lead people to dig a little bit more deeper into like, okay, what was India's relationship with Britain in this period and where are the historical connections? And I'm sure somebody has written something out there that is far more intelligent than what I just said. But that's sort of how I see things like this, is that they are confections. They are what they are. But I hope they serve as jumping off points to having bigger conversations that are necessary to have.
Yeah. And kind of just really quickly what you were saying about how like these things that we enjoyed kind of in secret now being popular with romance. And Kristen and I have talked about this before. I think when we had our maybe Northanger Abbey discussion years ago, the derision of romance as a genre is very much rooted in misogyny, and like it's a thing only women enjoy, and therefore it is not capable of big themes and making good points and talking about like how people relate to each other. It is disposable, chick lit, right? People being embarrassed to read romance novels and things like that. And I think Bridgerton being so mainstream is really helpful for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and also it came at a time when we really needed it.
Yeah, we needed it in 2020. This day, 2020.
Yeah, it just delighted. It just delights me. And I'm really glad it exists on the screen. I'm really glad they're taking the liberties they can to change things from the source material. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next.
I would love to add a quick coda about the show. And just like one other detail that I want to talk about is something that's in the book and is a touchstone in the book is the family playing Pall Mall.
Oh my gosh, like, why did we not talk about
so
that?
like croquet, what is up with Pall Mall? Someone explain to me.
I think it's slightly different rules or 2 different names for the same thing, but the heart of Bridgerton, like what Bridgerton does best, is always illustrate these family relationships in a really real way. And the fact that they all get together and they're competitive about Pall Mall, and Edwina and I so related to this so hard.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I don't care about this. This is a stupid game. I don't want to play anymore.
We'll all have fun.